So, what are we all here for? What's our ultimate purpose? I mean, for centuries, that question has been at the very heart of human thought. In this explainer, we're going to unpack a really profound theological answer. And what's cool is, it's all based on a single, super compelling lecture that isn't afraid to tackle some of the biggest questions you can possibly ask.
I love this quote from the poet Whittier. It really sets the stage perfectly, doesn't it? I only know I cannot drift beyond his love and care. You know, these questions, where are we going? What happens when it's all over? What's our final destiny? They're totally universal. It's not just us wondering this stuff. It's been on people's minds for, well, all of human history.
Right. So, whither, what, and whence. It sounds a bit old-fashioned, but it boils down to the three great questions of existence. Where are we going? What are we? And where did we come from? The lecture we're looking at points out that it's human nature to ask these things. We can't help but peer into the unknown and try to figure out our place in the whole shebang.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this journey. First, we'll look at the universal question of the end. Then, we'll hit a major challenge from astronomy, see the theological comeback, and dive into the Christian view of our ultimate destiny. We'll also tackle the tricky question of the three fates and wrap it all up with a really interesting conclusion about what we can and can't know.
All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, the universal question. Now that word you see, eschatology, it might sound a bit academic or, purely religious, but the core idea behind it, it's totally universal. Pretty much every worldview, whether you're talking about ancient philosophers or modern physicists, has some kind of theory about the end of everything. It's just a fundamental part of how we try to make sense of it all.
And this is where we see a huge split in how people think about the end. On one hand, you have what you might call scientific eschatology. It often predicts a cosmological end, the heat death of the universe where everything just physically dissolves into a cold, empty void. It's kind of grip, a story of extinction, really. But on the other hand, the Christian view is what's called teleological, which is just a fancy way of saying it's purpose-driven. The end goal isn't extinction, it's personal immortality. The whole tone is fundamentally positive and, well, hopeful.
But this whole idea of a purpose-driven destiny, it really slammed into a wall. A huge challenge came along with the rise of modern astronomy. A really powerful objection popped up, and for a lot of people, it created a genuine crisis of meaning. So where did it all start? Well, it kicked off when we realized the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, and the Copernican revolution, that was just the beginning. Once the telescope came along, it revealed a universe that was so much bigger, so much more vast than anyone had ever dreamed of. And suddenly our planet, it felt like nothing more than an insignificant speck of dust in a cosmic ocean.
And that brings us to the core of the challenge. I mean, think about it. If we're on just one tiny planet orbiting one pretty average star in a galaxy with billions of stars in a universe with maybe trillions of galaxies, then why here? Why on Earth, literally, would this seemingly unimportant little rock be the grand stage for a stupendous, one-of-a-kind divine drama?
And look, this was not some minor philosophical quibble. For thinkers like David Strauss, this massive shift in our cosmic perspective was nothing less than a death blow to the entire Christian view of the world. That argument, the one from our own apparent insignificance, it was powerful then, and you know what? It's still incredibly powerful today. So the big question is, how does theology even begin to respond to that? To this crushing argument from scale? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The rebuttal doesn't try to argue on the same terms. Instead, it completely reframes the whole debate by focusing on something else entirely, the value of a single soul. Okay, so the absolute core of the response is this pivot from quantity to quality. The objection from science is all about quantitative value, right? It's about physical size, numbers, how big the universe is. The theological rebuttal just flips that on its head. It shifts the focus to qualitative value. The argument is that the existence of even one rational, spiritual life is way more significant than any amount of dead, inanimate matter. It's a really powerful shift in thinking. Stop measuring worth by size and start measuring it by significance. So the lecture breaks this defense down into three main counter-arguments. First, like we just said, mind is simply more valuable than matter. Simple as that. Second, the objection kind of assumes God has human limitations, like he could get overwhelmed or distracted by how many stars there are. And third, and this one is a really provocative idea, What if this planet gets special attention precisely because it's the one world that's sinful or lost?
And this, quote, this just gets right to the heart of that third point. It's basically the parable of the lost sheep on a cosmic scale. Think about it. Is it not the divinest thing that God can do to seek and to save the lost? From this point of view, the most divine act possible is to go after the one lost sheep or the one lost world in a flock of billions. When you think of it that way, asking, shall its size prevent? Well, the question becomes absurd. The size is totally irrelevant. You can't measure the worth of a soul in light years.
Okay, so with that huge cosmic objection addressed, let's pivot back to the positive vision. What is this far-off divine event? What is the ultimate destiny that this worldview actually points to for all of us?
The lecture lays out this beautiful three-part vision for the end. First, there's conformity to the Son. The ultimate goal is for people to be made like Christ, not just in some abstract way, but in their actual moral and spiritual character. Second, and this is key, is the redemption of the body. This isn't just about the soul floating off somewhere. It's about the whole person being redeemed, which implies a new, glorified physical existence. And third, to go along with that, there's a renewal of nature. A new, perfected physical world, a new heaven and earth, to match our new, glorified state.
But there's an obvious and very difficult question here. What about the people who don't reach this end? And this brings us to what is, without a doubt, one of the most challenging and hotly debated parts of this whole theology, the final fate of those who are considered wicked. So the lecture lays out the three main theories that have been debated for centuries. First, you have universalism, the belief that in the end, all human souls will be restored and saved. Second is annihilation, which is the idea that the wicked, after some period of punishment, will just cease to exist. They'll be utterly destroyed. And third is the view that has often been the prevailing one, eternal punishment, the belief that the wicked will exist forever in a state of conscious suffering or loss. So, here we are faced with these three profoundly different, conflicting, and, let's be honest, deeply consequential theories. So where does the lecture land? Well, as we head into the final section, the conclusion it offers might not be what you're expecting at all.
Instead of picking a side and championing one of those three views, the author argues for something he calls a wise agnosticism. It's a call for intellectual humility. The idea is simple. On these huge cosmic questions where Scripture seems to be silent or uses heavy symbolic language, maybe the wisest thing we can do is to hold back from being dogmatically certain.
And this quote just nails that final point. The conclusion I arrive at is that we have not the elements of a complete solution and we ought not to attempt it. In other words, we just don't have all the pieces to solve this particular puzzle. So we should probably stop trying to map out the unknowable and instead shift our focus to what we can know. Our responsibility, right here, right now.
And that's where we land. We're left with this final, incredibly powerful question. By essentially drawing a veil over the ultimate future, the lecture forces our attention away from some distant cosmic mystery and brings it right back to the personal, to the present. The big takeaway here isn't some detailed map of the afterlife. It's a much more immediate and pressing question. Given what we do know, what is our responsibility today? How should we choose to live our lives now?